Hi friends, it's Natasha from Can We Make It Mom? This upcycle project is inspired by the Take 3 for the Sea campaign. Their message is take 3 pieces of rubbish with you when you leave the beach, waterway or anywhere and you have made a difference. So I've designed this little beach collecting bag upcycled from curtain lace, and believe it or not, this tiny bag collected 26 pieces of rubbish. This pattern is available in my Etsy store. It's linked in the description, and I'm going to donate 50% of every single sale of this pattern to Take 3 for the Sea. And no, this isn't sponsored, I just really wanted to get involved. I also played around with this curtain lace that had such a pretty design and openings at the top. It was just a bit of free-flowing play and letting the lace guide me, just to have fun and give you another option and hopefully inspire you. All the supplies here are listed in the description below, but you really don't need all of them to complete either of these bags. I'm starting the first bag by making a strap, which is 8 centimeters or 3 inches by 111 centimeters or 44 inches. And this is where I got to pull out my quilting ruler, which I don't get to use it very much. I'm not a quilter yet, but I have big plans. Then you just fold it over. We're going to do a 1 centimeter seam down the side and across the bottom, which was going to really just help us turn it right side out. I'm also making my drawstring using a technique called ruler, and it is 3 centimeters by 60 centimeters, which is exactly the width of my ruler. And for the ruler, I just sewed it straight down the middle. I used an 80 by 12 universal needle to sew the cotton. For the strap, we snipped the corner, and I just started off by poking my thumb in and used my trusty chopstick to flip it right side out. I give it a little bit of a wiggle and then press it all nice and flat. I'm using this loop turner to make the ruler. It's such a cool little tool. It has a little hook on the end, so when you push all your fabric on, you just catch it. You can make a little snip and the little tooth feeds through the snip, and it is a little tricky to get started. Give it a little wiggle. Once you help it get started off, it's really so satisfying, feels so good, and whoops. Mine actually lost it halfway through, but don't freak out if this happens to you. You can recatch it. You just have to kind of feel your way from the outside and feel the little hook grab onto the tip again. Trust me, it's not a complete failure if this happens to you. You can resurrect it. The first bag does have a pattern. To prep the pattern, you just have to stick the 2 bag portions together to make one big rectangle. It's very similar from one way to the other. Just make sure once you've cut it, you don't lose which way is up. Otherwise, the circle won't sew so nicely together. Curtain lace has a front and a back. The front is nice and smooth, and the back has all the raised texture. If you look closely, you'll be able to tell pretty easily. To start sewing, we're going to do a 6mm hem at the top. This is going to enclose the raw edge. And fun fact, curtain lace doesn't actually fray. Leaving a raw edge wouldn't really matter, but we are going to close them in this project. Sewing with lace can be a little tricky. When starting a seam, I gently pull on the threads coming out of the back, and as I'm sewing the first few stitches, I am helping it feed through. This will help stop it chewing into the very start. I'm using a 7011 universal needle to sew my lace. Step 2 is making a channel for the drawstring. My first stitch did pull it in just a tiny bit, but it won't really matter in the end. If this happens to you as well, just stretch it out really nice and gently, being careful not to snap any stitches. There is a little notch on the pattern to guide you. Doing notches on curtain lace is pretty impossible. I just kept my pattern right next to me and lined it up. The next step is sewing the side seam. We're going to start our French seam. So you actually want to sew the wrong sides together first, and then we're going to flip it and sew the right sides together so the seam is on the inside. It can feel a little backwards if you haven't done a French seam before, but trust the process. I sew mine from the bottom up because when we're aligning the circle to the bottom edge, you want that to be the most precise place. It's kind of easy to see with lace. You can see through and see where the seam is, but you want to sew just on the outside of that. If you sew too close and sew on the seam, you're going to get little eyelashes. You'll have a hairy seam, which nobody wants that. Usually on a French seam, you would trim it down and then sew it, but I'm going a bit rogue today. I want this to be fun and quick and not too fussy. Next, we're going to sew our circle bottom. And don't be scared, this isn't as hard as it looks. I did put notches on the pattern, but because this has a pretty design, I just folded it in half along the design way and I put pins in. They do kind of fall out. I don't really have any advice for that, but to just be very gentle with your pieces. So I fold it in half, put pins on the halfway, and then fold it in half the opposite way, put pins in those halves, so you've got a mark on each quarter. And I do the same on the bag, using the seam in place of one pin. You align 1/4 pin from the circle and the bag, and I replaced it with a clip because it's not going to fall out. Then you move along to the next pin, align the pins together, hold it in place, pull the pins out, replace it with a clip, and so on around the circle. You can add more clips in between those markings if you want. I would definitely recommend the more fastenings the better, especially when you're just starting out. We're also going to sew the circle base with a French seam. It's okay, you got this, I'm here with you. The most important thing is you're doing wrong sides together. So the lumpy bumpy side against the lumpy bumpy side. I sew these kind of things really slowly, really just stitch by stitch, and put your needle down into the project and lift the foot to spin it around. And please do this as many times as you need, even if it's just every 3 stitches. When you do sew a circle onto a straight piece, you really need to sew on the circle side, not the straight side. The circle is the inner curve and the flat is the outer curve. The seams are the same length, but the circle's smaller, and I know that doesn't make sense. As you're going around, when you lift the pieces up to move, it helps you get a nice even edge. One of the main things I think is keeping the underneath, meaning the bag portion, really flat underneath. So as you're spinning your circle, you also want to be flipping the bag underneath nice and flat. The more fluffing about the better, in my opinion. Take as long as it takes. This is where precision is everything, but don't be scared. Once you've done this a few times, it really will become easier and easier. Yay, you survived a circle. Now we flip it with right sides together and we're gonna sew around the circle again. I wiggle the seam so I know I've got the very edge of it, and I go around and clip it once again. We're gonna sew it from the circle side again. That really is the rule, I think. And again, keeping the bag, the underneath, flat as well really is important. Take your time. It's such a quick project anyway. This is really where you should be, taking the time to get a nice round bottom base, to get a nice round base. Fold the raw edge in. Next, we're attaching the straps. I aligned mine with the drawstring and then the opposite side of the bag. And I sewed it on the inside, just underneath the channel. I left about 1/4 inch below the channel to do the little box with a cross way of attaching a strap. You go across the top, down the side, back up to the top corner, down the side, back up to the other top corner, down again and across the bottom. This bag really won't get that heavy, but I still wanted to attach it in the proper way. getting our drawstring through is the very last step. I tied a knot in one end and attached a safety pin to the other and just simply fed it through. And once it was through the other side, I tied a knot and it's all done. I think it's fun to play with different fabrics. It does build your confidence. The more different fabrics, the more needle types you try. Playing around really is the key to growing your skills and confidence. For the second bag, I really just let the lace dictate how it was going to come together. I aligned the scalloped edge back over itself and just chopped a huge rectangle. To sew up the sides, I decided to do a French seam again. I think with anything sheer or delicate like this, the French seam really does make it stronger because you're basically sewing the seam twice. I just sewed down the side using the edge of my foot as a guide and flipped it the other way, right sides together, and sewed down the side again. Once my side seam was done, I aligned the scallops up really neatly and I'm doing a zigzag stitch just underneath the scallop. Number 4 on my machine is the zigzag, and I took it right down to the smallest width and the smallest length, which was 0.5 and 0.5, but this ended up being too small, so I took the width back up to 1.5 centimeters. And I just went slowly around the curve, making sure I kept the little scallop design nice and even. It actually blends in so nicely, which was such a pleasant surprise. It looks like part of the lace design, and it's such a cute way to make the most of the design. I have this extremely long piece of crochet chain. Well, I was trying to teach myself to crochet, although it's not the best material for a bag strap. The color and the vibe, it just seemed nice to me. So I decided to cut my 111 centimeter strap length. I cut a little extra for tying it together. If you have any ideas what I can do with this mega long chain of crochet, please let me know in the comments. I have no idea what to do with it. I tried to go all crochet on you and I pulled the loose end through with my crochet hook, which is why it was in the tools earlier. I'm sorry to any professional crocheters for how clumsy this might look. Basically, you just push your crochet needle through the last loop, get the loose end and pull it through, and then I tied a knot. I just snipped off and frayed the end to make kind of like a tassel vibe, and that's it. It can be one long strap for over the body, or you can pull the strap from the other end and make 2 little handles. This is how I'm celebrating Earth Day this year, teaching my Baba to care for our beautiful oceans. You don't have to wait for Earth Day, of course. Looking after our beautiful planet can be every day. What's your favorite ocean emoji? Thanks so much for watching. And of course, yes, we can make it. Bye!